Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weichel. And thank you for your patience, Ms. Doreen. I know you've adjusted your schedule to meet ours, so we thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my pleasure to be here to act as the voice of the employer. So I think we're going to have a slight departure in the conversation. I am Annette Smith-Doring. I'm the Workforce Development Manager for Sutter Health. My specific area of responsibility is the greater 9-county Sacramento area, but I do represent the organization. And in addition, I am a member of the State Workforce Investment Board, 2 local workforce investment boards, the Hospital Association Workforce Committee, and a delegate to the International Health Workforce Conference. So my life is workforce all the time. The reason being is because of the critical issues we have around developing the workforce for the healthcare sector across its various spectrums, whatever that may be for you. Sutter Health, for those that don't know, is an integrated healthcare network. We've got 24 hospitals, about 50,000 employees, roughly 6,000 physicians throughout Northern California. We go down to Los Banos. And what is most important to us, though, are the 3 million patient lives that we are privileged to serve and the members of our community. And in order to do that, our goal is to be not only the provider of excellent care to those communities, but really to be a transformative agent in the healthcare delivery system. But we can't do that if we don't have good, qualified talent to meet the needs of those patients. And so you've heard a lot about various programs that are working and not working. We have made significant investments in workforce development and collaborative projects with our workforce investment boards and community college partners. But to truly realize the promise of the Affordable Care Act, we need universal access to the best available medical talent. The combination of career technical education and workforce investments outlined in the budget have significant impact in California's ability to move people from poverty to prosperity. I have jobs that are waiting right now for the right qualified talent that are life-changing salaries for people. You can spend time at a community college. We can debate if it's a 2-year or truly a 4-year degree after you get your prerequisites and allied health education, but you can graduate making about $100,000 a year as a new graduate, which I rethink my career choice on a regular basis because of that. But it really, I mean, if we're looking to really move people and to move the economic prosperity of the state of California, healthcare and healthcare employment is one way certainly to make that happen. One of the great things, you've heard a lot about CTE today. I think one of the challenges as I was listening to the comments is that people maybe don't understand the CTE nomenclature. When I was in high school, we won't talk about how long ago that was. CTE was maybe
among friends.
My peers, I know. Maybe shop or woodworking or something like that. But today it's engineering, it's healthcare, it's all of those professions that align well with the high growth, high wage sectors in our state. And so I really want to make sure that we understand that CTE is something that's essential to our success moving forward, not just for my organization, but really the state of California. The regional consortia that's been created, as Mr. Weichel mentioned, has been transformative. I've been doing this work for about 15 years, and this is the first time through the Career Pathways Trust that I actually saw people at the table in the room between K-12, post-secondary, and employers to develop employer-driven applications for the Career Pathways Trust. And so to minimize the amount of effort that's gone through and not continue that funding stream would be a true shame. And when we haven't had an opportunity to truly realize the benefits presented by those opportunities. And I'd like to give you a couple of examples of where this has really worked and this sort of collaborative efforts have worked. There was a project that we were involved with, a local WIB, the Department of Human Assistance and a local California community college that braided funding together from each entity to take long-term unemployed or underemployed or frankly homeless individuals and get them into an allied health education training program. I had the privilege to meet one of the participants, this gentleman who was truly living in a tent down by the river, and through braiding those funds and resources was able to get affordable housing, was able to get additional supports while he was going through his academic program, and successfully graduated to become a registered nurse, making that salary I mentioned earlier, that $100,000. He happens to work for one of our competitors, but I'm not bitter about that. But it truly is life-changing for people. Another project that's currently ongoing is using one of the California Workforce Investment Board Workforce Accelerator grants that you heard from Mr. Rainey earlier. It's in partnership with my organization and American River College to design and accelerate registered nurse training for returning veterans. I know that's an interest for this body, who have experience or training as a medic, and there are some statutory and regulatory challenges to just giving them a credential as a registered nurse. But one of the ways that we can address that is to create a bridge program for them to get the training that they may have missed, which will save them 2 semesters of their registered nurse training program. So they would have about a year to complete that program. So that's pretty an exciting opportunity. And that was funded through the Workforce Investment Board's Workforce Accelerator grant opportunity. The current budget recommendations enhance much-needed access and support at the community colleges, which do provide the majority of allied health talent in California, but also the CSUs and UCs that provide our professional and research levels. I think we've all heard about the desperate need we have for primary care physicians to realize the promise of the Affordable Care Act, and without that continued funding stream and support, California is going to be significantly challenged to be able to meet the needs of the increased insured population. While we agree that with the Legislative Analyst's Office that the proposed budget doesn't immediately align the various workforce and education stakeholders, it does provide incremental support to current efforts to better align the various education and workforce systems, having been on the other side of those systems. And as a customer, I can tell you I don't disagree that they need some alignment, but I've seen tremendous gains in the last year and a half in moving that needle forward. I think lastly, we talked about, one of the committee members mentioned the amount of funds that California invests in incarcerating citizens. And I really honestly believe, shouldn't we invest as much, if not more, in educating and training our citizens to move into high growth, high wage employment? And with that, I strongly urge you to support the education and workforce investments outlined in the budget. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith-Doring.
Thank you.
And to the entire panel, this has been very compelling presentations, and I would tell you that I've a range of feelings here, from hopeful to encouraged to devastated. And I will get back to Dr. Jones in just a moment, because I do want to go over a couple of your slides. With regard to all the encouraging presentations from the Department of Education, glad to know that your assessment is that we've had successful regional cooperation and collaboration, specifically with the implementation of our CTE Pathways Initiative. And I just want to credit, and I know many of us were with Senator Steinberg when we went to Long Beach for that tour of the Long Beach Promise, which I think I can honestly say was his inspiration for authoring SB 1070 and the CTE Pathways Initiative. But taking that to the slide on page 9 of Dr. Jones, the need outstrips capacity, it seems like we're just leaving millions of Californians behind at the most basic level. And if we can take a very high perspective, altitudinally high perspective of what we're trying to address here, which is chronic unemployment and underemployment in the state of California, increasing income disparity, and our very high rate of poverty. I don't know if we are truly addressing those concerns if these numbers, and I don't doubt your numbers, Doctor, they're just so devastating in their size that we're barely above single-digit attention to the great need that we have here in the state. And I would imagine what you're suggesting is we need great multiples of this $500 million investment.
I'm suggesting more than that. I'm suggesting that not only do we need more money and resources, but we need more people at the table doing this work. And what I would want to leave you with is more hope than I have seen in this field in my 30 years of doing this work.
glad to hear that.
The fact that folks are coming together at the local level and at the state level, and the different agencies are here at the table doing this work. I think we're doing this work better than we have ever done this work. So please don't be devastated. I think, we take the piece that we can possibly do, and I think if we do it well, that's a step.
But these numbers really reflect the cuts that were made after the crash of '08. And we are inching our way back, and we know it's not going to be restored in a year or two or three. But it really, I think, underscores the need for continued resources, because with all great for coordination, collaboration, and we're doing our job better. That's what I'm hearing you say, and there's reason to be hopeful. But unless we can get back to the levels of funding we were at prior to '07, '08, we're really going to be leaving millions of people behind. That's what your slide at the bottom of page 9 is suggesting. And the biggest number there of unmet need is in ESL. And that's about as basic as you can get for people to be able to enter into the workforce and be able to get to the great dream that Ms. Smith-Doring is suggesting is there for those who can at least get some training and plug it into the opportunities that you're providing that are sitting there waiting. I suspect my colleagues have some questions or comments. No?
Just one quick question. And I want to thank the panelists. I was watching you on TV when I wasn't here, and honestly, your commitment and enthusiasm for what you're doing really comes through, and that's what's going to make the systems come together. It truly is. So thank you so much. I'm wondering about again, what's been called the fragmented and incomplete data collection, particularly for adult education programs. What are the consortia doing to really align these systems so that we can have easy access, clear information for policymakers? Because it's what we lack so often.
Right now they're looking for guidance from the state. They're working so hard with spreadsheets and conversations. They have hired consultants. They're doing a lot of work on the ground, but it is fragmented until we have a system or have developed those outcomes and those performance indicators that we're needing. They're working, we have, again, 70 individual consortia reporting.
Right.
So it's a need, it's something we're working on, and there are champions.
What would be the appropriate body to develop a single set of definitions for indicators that everybody would collect and submit? And they don't have to be many. I always think, really, there should be 8 to 10 things that we could use to really track progress. If you get a 30-page sheet of paper, you're not, at least we here, aren't going to have time to go through it. But, what would be the appropriate place to go for those standard definitions and data points?
I think that's some of the work that's being done that you saw with Mr. McMahon and Mr. Rainey earlier on in the WIO work. Those of us around the table, everybody that's presented today. There are also other states and other research on common metrics. Some states have as few as 5 in the adult education world: get a job, keep a job, transition to post-secondary, and transition to training, actually to employment. It can be, like you said, it can be simple. It can also be very complex. It's going to take a lot of different people. It's also going to take the practitioners who are doing this work.
Okay, because we've been working on this in the prison system, right, and working with it in realignment. And there is a group the Board of State and Community Corrections that has been tasked with developing those definitions and data points. It seems like there really isn't a comparative body, but I hope maybe, I don't know, the legislature working together or the administration looking at it could find a way to bring that task to fruition while you're doing this regional planning. Because I think it would give us a really strong platform to build on then in the future. So, Department of Finance is down there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hancock. Senator Roth and then Senator Mitchell.
Just wanted to apologize for having to step out, but I wanted to commend you for your work on behalf of our veterans. I did hear your testimony. I want to commend you for the work to eliminate some of the barriers and obstacles to jobs that folks face, specifically including veterans. And for those of you who are working on performance metrics or who will be working on performance metrics, I want to thank you generally for working on a system of performance metrics so we can measure what we do. In the service, we used to say what gets measured gets done. I'm not sure state government and things that happen in the state of California are any different. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roth. Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Senator Leno. You asked a question at the top of the hearing, I believe it was to the first panel, about whether or not they look to other states for best practices. And my question would be, do we look adequately internally within the state at regional best practices? A number of us here on this side of the horseshoe were having sidebars about programs we know going on in our districts. Senator Pavley mentioned to Senator Roth when he asked the question about veterans about something going on in her district. So how is the regional cross-fertilization happening, or is it?
It absolutely is. And on the website, the AB 86 website, we have practices with promise, and those are actually submitted by the local regional consortia. In the report that's coming out next week, you'll see practices by our local consortia. And every Friday, we're hosting and featuring a local consortia to do those best practices.
Got you. Director Weichel, you talked about the fact that the pipeline had dwindled, and you talked about steps you're taking to try to increase. But my question or my thought at the time was, are there barriers? What caused kind of the dwindling to occur, if you will?
I don't know that we're sure. We do know that there are many state universities that used to offer single subject credentials in career technical education courses that are no longer doing that. That we seem to have the strongest participation in ag. So we seem to be barely meeting the need every year for ag teachers, but we have heard of programs closing in K-12 schools simply because they did not have the instructors. And if you can imagine that teacher credentialing requirements that a person has to first obtain a bachelor's degree and spend a minimum of 4 years doing that. And especially in high-tech programs, industrial technology programs, for instance, that's my background. I could get hired right out of college and make a lot more money with a 4-year college education. I don't have to stick around for the 5th year to get my teaching credential and make less money. So there's not much encouragement for an adult or a young person to go into teaching when they have to spend 5 years doing that and make less money. And that's why we're taking a close look at the designated subject people that have historically worked in the ROPs, because those are people that have had the occupational experience and they've either taken a change in their career focus and decide to teach, or maybe they've retired from that particular job or for health reasons have to leave that job and then enter the teaching profession in that way. And that's why we've had that discussion in our office to focus in on those people. And then during that discussion, the question came up about, well, what about veterans? They get high quality training in the military.
Right.
And many of them are exiting the military after just a few years, but are highly trained in an occupational area. Could we somehow encourage those individuals to enter the teaching profession. So we're currently having those discussions, and actually we're looking at some of the pathway money, the SB 1070 money, to be used for that purpose. We just haven't finished that RFP yet and how we're going to do that, but we are looking at that.
Last question, sir. I just stepped out to meet with some constituents, a group of young people from Venice Youth Bill and Community Bill in my district. And so they were talking to me about a particular bill, and I said, wait a minute, you know that's what we're, they started to tell their personal stories. This program changed my life. I've got job training, blah, blah, blah. And I said, that's what we're talking about in budget hearing, blank faces. So that's always very, I think, frustrating for us as policymakers that we know of good work going on here, good work going on here, and it's difficult to connect the dots. So you may not be the appropriate panel, but just since I just met with them, are those kinds of nonprofit organizations pulled into this new opportunity around job training and career tech? And if so, in what way?
Well, I think what we've seen through the Career Pathways Trust, for instance, is many nonprofits getting involved in that regional discussion. Not only are they at the table, but I think more importantly, business and industry has come to the table. We're looking, I think educators are looking at business and industry much in a different way than we have. As far as, typically we've gone to business and industry and said, give us money, we need money. And I think that message has changed now. We really need their help in designing the curriculum to meet their needs. And I see a real shift of almost looking at business and industry as a client.
Right.
And focused on their needs. And you talked earlier about best practices. So that's the other thing that the California Career Pathways Trust is doing. In May, we're scheduling a meeting in Berkeley area. Number one, to tour some best practices that are happening in the Oakland area with the Career Pathways Trust, but also to bring first round recipients together and share best practices with each other.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Can I just add to
Please,
that?
please.
I think with a lot of the nonprofits are engaged through the Workforce Investment System, and with the Workforce Investment Opportunities Act, there's actually much more emphasis on youth development and youth training, especially for out-of-school youth. So I think we'll see a lot more programs like that Youth Build program.
Because their concern was, they said, oh, well, we've aged out. I said, I'm looking around at them like, aged out? Well, what age group are you talking about? 18 to 24. I said, trust me.
Right.
You have not aged out.
They have not.
So I just think it's a matter of making sure, right, that we have a responsibility also as policymakers to try to get this information back into our districts to make sure that all of the moving parts that are working with the same population, with the same general goal, are plugged into these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Senator Nielsen.
After the public comment.
After public comment. Okay, very good. You've been terrific. Thank you very much for giving us your day. Could I see a show of hands or bodies rising? Who will be, all right, line up, please. Let's see. We are glad you are with us, and thank you for your patience. Why don't you come up to the table, fill up the seats, and of course, if you could be as succinct as possible, but
absolutely.
I want to hear everything you got to say.
I'm Ernie Silva. I'm here on behalf of SciTech. We're as Senator Leno knows, we're a dropout recovery high school program, and we work in partnership with Department of Labor programs in many of your districts, including Senator Mitchell's and Senator Roth's, and I know Senator Hancock has been out to visit as well. I want to make 3 quick comments. I'm really impressed by the work that Tim Rainey's doing on WIOA implementation. I want to speak on behalf of the over 180,000 kids that leave public high schools every year, and on behalf of those programs like ours that try and re-engage those students. WIOA has some presents us with great opportunities to serve those kids. WIOA requires that local plans include dropout recovery services. WIOA includes a high school diploma as a primary indicator of performance for out-of-school youth. No less than 14 times WIOA talks about out-of-school youth. Schools like SciTech are working with the WIA one-stop centers and other Department of Labor programs to provide those services. I want to encourage you as we're moving forward to prioritize that public high school diploma in the work that you do to support WIOA implementation and other career tech education collaboration. It's a gate with a public high school diploma is a gateway to accessing high-level career skills, and it results in a full 49% increase in earning power with that diploma alone. So we look forward to working with you, and I'll send you a letter with detail.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Silva, and please thank Sciatech for us for the great work you're doing in saving those young lives. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Molly Smith. I'm from Palomar College. I'm the Director of Occupational, Non-Credit, and Workforce Education. I'm here representing the California Community College Association of Occupational Education. That's representing the CTE professionals and workforce development professionals in the community colleges. I'm also a member of the BOG Task Force. I first want to say that we're very grateful for the attention to not only adult education, career technical education, and I'm very encouraged by the knowledge and motivation of this body. We are working across about 8 different initiatives right now in the community colleges and the high school and adult ed to include the proposed adult ed block grant and the consortia, SB 1070, apprenticeship, and the CDPC. We are working hard to align to work on alignment, career pathways, and populate that pipeline. We're working across, in particular, the discussion just about the metrics, 3 systems that are funded and measured differently. So it's kind of a heavy lift. We are working to put in place the infrastructure. In particular, I want to speak to SB 1070. And you have to understand that our institutions are disproportionately focused on transfer. And as a culture, we're disproportionately focused on sending our kids to college. So that 70% that Senator McGuire spoke about, that's the primary focus of our population. And I also want to speak to what Senator McGuire talked about, which was no dedicated funding for CT in the high schools. The local control, you know, I'm working with high schools. I just met with a high school this week, and their programs are, they've let their programs go fallow for the very reasons in which they're reinforced. Finally, I want to speak to the long term, and this is under the guise of the work of the task force, is to create and maintain an ongoing stable funding for funding source for career pathways. And, you know, we're creating the infrastructure for the pipeline, so we have to be able to fund it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Hi, Leilani Aguinaldo-Yi on behalf of the Los Angeles Unified School District. LAUSD is the largest adult school provider in the country. In 13-14, we serviced close to 100,000 adult learners in our district. And as such, we are very grateful for the $500 million that the governor has proposed for adult education in his January proposal, particularly the emphasis on maintenance of effort districts like LAUSD. For the last 2 years, we've had to rely on general fund dollars to sustain our programs. So this prioritization is a big help for our district. That said, we do have a few concerns that I did want to touch on today in the governor's proposal, namely the allocation board that the governor has outlined. We have concerns related to governance that are outlined in the LAO's analysis, as well as what we see as a disconnect between this added level of bureaucracy and how it relates to the consortia that we were tasked with developing out of AB 86. Additionally, as the state contemplates how the state dollars flows from the state level down to the regions, we want to ensure that there is consideration for stability for districts so that year in, year out, as LEAs develop our local budgets under education code statutes for timelines, that there is consideration for, so that to minimize uncertainty for districts as they plan ahead for their level of services year in, year out. Thank you.